Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. And on tonight's show, we will be covering the state of agriculture in the state of Texas. And on tonight's show, we have a man very well qualified to talk about this subject. On tonight's show, we have Nate Sheets. And Nate is a candidate for the Texas State Agriculture Commissioner. And Nate's background in agriculture is quite astute. He is one of the very few men that took his pastime, his hobby, his passion, and turned it into a multi-million-dollar venture. Out of his garage, out of his backyard, he developed a passion for beekeeping, and he took that and began producing honey. And he eventually built his company, Nature's Nate Honey Company, and it became the number one branded honey company in the country. A truly incredible story. Nate, how are you doing tonight?
Man, Chris, it is great to be with you today. It's what an exciting time.
We're very glad to have you on the show, and we want to get right into it. So, Nate, I'm just going to ask you a completely open-ended question. Tell me, what is the state of agriculture in the state of Texas today?
You know, it's a really challenging time right now in agriculture in the state of Texas. There are so many things that are challenging. All the input costs have gone up for producers, whether you're a farmer or whether you're a rancher. Your labor is more, your interest rates are more, your land cost is more, your cattle's more, your seed's more, everything's more. And so, we've lost in America, last year we lost 7% of all farmers in America. That was 122,000 farms. And in Texas, we lost 68 farms this week and last week and the week before. All the way back to 2018, we've lost 17,000 producers. And those are the small producers, the lifeblood of rural Texas that we're losing. And so, there's no greater and harder working person out there than a farmer or a rancher, but it's also the most challenging time that they have ever faced, maybe in agriculture.
What's causing these losses?
At the end of the day, I mean, there are a lot of factors that go into that. One, it's an aging population. Farmers are older today than they ever have been. And financially, it's a very challenging environment. That a producer in 1980, a farmer, made 40 cents of every $1 of food. Today, 45 years later, they make 15 cents of that same $1 of food. A rancher back in the 70s made 70 cents. Today, they make 30 cents. And so producers have a revenue problem. They don't have the ability to sell their product for enough money to enough people, and so it's an incredibly challenging place to be in agriculture, and it's actually created an environment where young people can't even get into agriculture unless you have a multi-generational farm, that's being handed down to you because your great grandfather started it. But there's no new people coming into agriculture these days like we need.
I mean, it's incredible vulnerability. Our country was built on the bedrock of our country was farming. And I grew up working on Black Angus farms outside of Oil City, Pennsylvania. I think most of the people, when I was a child, farming was a very productive, abundant industry. And now it seems to be almost going away. I'm sorry to ask the question again. What is causing this decline in farming?
There's a consolidation happening in agriculture to where small farms are going out of business. That's all rolling up into larger farms. And even Brooke Rollins, who's the Secretary of Agriculture for the USDA, we were together about 2 weeks ago, and she said, we need to deconsolidate agriculture. Because we have, for instance, you talked about Pennsylvania. Dairies are going out of business in Pennsylvania. Why? Because they actually don't have people to milk the cows. So in that scenario, labor is an issue. In South Texas, a citrus grower, they've got the H-2A visa program, but they wind up paying $40 an hour. You go on the other side of the river and they're paying someone $2 a day. So again, that's a labor issue. And so we're having agriculture that is offshoring because it's cheaper and easier. And then we're having the consolidation happening. But at the end of the day, my goal and one of the things that I feel like we can do and have to do in agriculture in Texas specifically is to help create new markets for producers to be able to sell direct to consumers and sell through retail stores and not rely upon this traditional distribution that they had selling their production.
I just want to. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm thinking out loud. Does private equity have anything to do with the fact that these farms are consolidating? Because for example,
Absolutely.
in the medical industry, the mom and pop medical office, the local doctor's office is going away as private equity with this abundance of cash is coming in and buying these up, consolidating them, limiting our choices. Is it that same thing happening in the agricultural space?
Yeah, I think private equity is always looking for industries that are ripe to be rolled up, to be able to consolidate, and so that helps expedite. When you have a private equity group that has the financial resources to come in and acquire an initial business, and they have an investment thesis that they believe that they can build on top of, and so once they figure out what their anchor business is that they're going to purchase, then they're going to bolt on additional acquisitions to help grow the platform and to drive greater profitability. Because ultimately, private equity is in a 5 to 7 year cycle of acquiring a business, increasing levels of profitability, and then going out and selling it. And so, from a longer term perspective, the risk, even to American agriculture, is when it's just a financial transaction. It could be it could be a foreign agent, coming in and buying a company, and so you wind up losing control of U.S. companies that are controlled by foreign countries, just from the sheer fact of the process of what private equity does.
We had the Texas Railroad Commissioner on, and he explained how private investors are dictating what energy sources are being produced in the state of Texas because the companies that contract to do that work are not aligned with the citizens of Texas. They're aligned with these investors from far off places, and these investors are saying, "Okay, we want windmills, alternative energy in the state of Texas," and now us Texans are very vulnerable to energy sources that don't work. And so it sort of sounds like,
Yep.
that same sort of scenario might be happening in our agricultural sector.
Yeah, and especially with BlackRock and Blackstone, who ultimately, at the end of the day, they had their ESG, environmental social governance. That's what ESG stands for. That they would require for companies that they invested into to adopt a ESG or a DEI policy, and so they would dictate who would you would have on your board. But you know when BlackRock, Blackstone, who are in bed with the large banks, J.P. Morgan Chase and Bank of America, you, when you get the money source pushing an agenda, then it's easy to push it onto pretty much any size company at that point, because everybody needs lenders to be able to be in business. And so, the same thing is true in the agriculture world. They're less concerned about, ensuring that that local company that they purchase continues to have influence in that small community. They're more concerned about, driving the multiple of EBITDA to be able to make greater profit, and I'm not belittling them. That's their business model, but there are inherent risks to that. Now, praise the Lord that Donald Trump is in, and ESG and DEI are quickly dying on the vine or have died. And so we don't have that same type of influence, especially in energy production, that we've had historically. But the private equity model is still there, and they're always looking for great opportunities to roll up. The largest landowner in America, you know who that is, Chris? A farm landowner.
I'm afraid to say that it's Bill Gates, but I don't know.
Bill Gates.
Oh
Bill
my
Gates.
goodness, I got it right.
and he
Yikes.
owns 30% of John Deere, and he's heavily invested in agriculture companies. And, so if you think about America is consolidating in the agriculture front, which means you have, and I'm not belittling a family farm that has scaled and grown in size, but when you have the largest, one of the wealthiest people in America owning the bulk of the land, and it's all a consolidated effort, it really needs to make you question and wonder why.
I want to take a quick minute to talk about our featured product. So, if we can, just for a second. And our featured product is the X39 patch. This patch is incredible. It's photo light therapy. And so, what it does is through photo light therapy, it stimulates your stem cells. Stem cells are the heart of life. They're what they keep us young. And so when you hear about athletes that get injured, they always get stem cell injections, which is a very dirty process, morally and ethically. This is none of that. This stimulates your existing stem cells. It brings them back to life. They've largely been suppressed due to the toxins in our lives, in our foods. And the X39 patch brings them back to life. It's an amazing technology. Right now, the X39 patch is made by LifeWave. LifeWave is the #1 fastest growing company in the country because of the X39 patch. And just to give you a couple of ideas, I don't know where it will heal your body, but it will heal your body somewhere. For me, I have a caffeine dependency, and after using the X39 patch, I no longer need caffeine. I have a very intensive week. I work out, I work late, and the X39 keeps me from having energy crashes, getting sleepy behind the wheel. I am alert and awake. I wake up 5 a.m., roll out of bed, ready to go. My production is off the charts. Also, in addition to this, and this is for the wives of the world. Wives, you hear your husbands getting up, having to go to the bathroom multiple times during the night. They get up, they have to go to the bathroom because after 40, you have pressure on your bladder, and it makes us men have to pee all the time. And what happens, we get up, and then we're stressed because we don't know if we can get back to sleep. The X39 patch has done away with that issue for me. So since having this patch, I no longer have that urge, that issue. It's incredible. It was like a prison sentence before. I am free. I can sleep at night without having to go pee all the time. But in addition to that, I have a friend, and he is a PTSD war veteran, and he has to take heavy meds to deal with all the issues that come from being overseas. And he has to take heavy meds to sleep at night. No longer, 2 weeks with the X39 patch, he no longer needs those heavy meds. I can go on and on. David up in Dallas had spots in his eyes. He began using the X39 patch. The spots went away. He no longer needs glasses. I can go on and on. Another woman up in Fort Worth, she fell, hit her head on the bathtub. For 10 years, she had daily headaches, awful headaches. 2 days with the X39 patch. The stem cells are stimulated. The headaches go away. It's incredible. It's the X39 patch. And to learn more, text the word Patriot to 330-606-2304. The price, $100 a month for the X39 patch, 30 patches. Once you start using it, you'll never want to go back. Text the word Patriot to 330-606-2304. Thank you. Okay, so Nate, we went over all the problems. What are the solutions to save our farming community?
Yeah, so we really need to be able to come alongside farmers and ranchers. You and I were talking earlier just about even the cattle industry. That has all specific challenges to it. But again, at the end of the day, if a company has a revenue problem, then they have to be able to sell more product, and they need to sell product at a more profitable level. So what can we do for producers? Well, like I said, in 1980, they made 40 cents of a dollar. Today, they're at 15 cents. So how do we give them access to more producers? Being in the honey industry for all those years, I used to go put products on the shelf myself in grocery stores. It's called direct store distribution. And so we have a Go Texan program that I was a member of back in the 90s. And I mean, it's good, but it's nowhere near what it can be. And I know that because, one, I've been a member, I've utilized it, I know its weaknesses, and I've penetrated every major retailer in America with my own honey program. And so we're going to go to retailers, and we're going to go create a robust Go Texan platform for local Texas producers to be able to go put it on their store shelves themselves if they want to. And again, that's wholesale, so it's far more than your 15 cents a dollar that you're getting right now. It's getting north of that. And then ultimately, we need to give producers access to consumers directly, which we can do through a digital platform like an Amazon, a Go Texas platform that it doesn't matter if a producer's nowhere near a grocery store in West Texas. If they have the ability to get on the internet, they can go sell to customers all over Texas and really the United States. And at that point, Chris, that's at full retail. And so that's even far beyond, what it makes today. So there's four main meat packers in America. There's Cargill, there's Tyson, which everybody knows Tyson, all the produce and the turkeys, or the poultry and the turkeys. Then we have JBS and we have National Beef. Well, the last two are actually owned, they're Brazilian companies. But those four companies control 85% of the meat market in America. They buy the animals from the producers. They kill them. They process them. They package them up, and they also own the brands that go into the retail store. So you're going in and you're buying the Cargill and the Tyson and the JBS brands that are at retail. Those producers, those packers, they make 70 cents of every $1 of food. The cattle producer makes 30 cents of every $1 of food. And so what I'm talking about is getting more into that dollar equation that those packers enjoy, being able to sell direct into retail. And it's a much more profitable line of business for them. And we've got to do that same thing for producers in Texas to help them survive.
Okay, and that was a very technical answer, so I apologize if I'm asking something that you already covered. But how do your solution for these issues with the margins in the small producers of our farming goods is to sell direct? How do you achieve that as the Texas Agriculture Commissioner?
Yeah, and so we have the Go Texas program. And so that is a program that is there to help producers to be able to market their goods and sell them. It is just not run at the level that it can be to give them more access to be able to go sell more. And so that's what we need to be able to go and do.
Has that model worked anywhere else? Sort of a state-sponsored platform to sell goods directly by our own companies?
Well, yeah. I mean, it happens all the time in retail. It's not, I don't know what other states have their equivalency of a Go Texan program, but it's what happens in retail every day. I mean, when I produced honey, I bottled it and I put a brand on it. And now, at the time, it was a lot easier to get into stores because of just where the grocery industry was at that point. Today, it's much more complicated. So I'm talking about doing this because I'm a free market guy. I don't believe that the government's the answer, but we have the ability because we have the Go Texan program to go meet with retailers and to get them to agree to create a section of the store that is going to be specifically carved out for Go Texan members. So right. It's as simple as that, or having more farmers markets and allowing producers to go sell direct to farmers markets. So one of the things, I've got 4 P's when I think about going in and taking over the Ag Commission. One is people, the second is process, the third is profit, and the fourth is product. So the people, we're going to go in and we're going to create a culture of excellence, a culture of service orientation to go and serve agriculture, and we're going to have staff of excellence. On the process side, we're going to go and review all the regulations because farmers and ranchers are over-regulated, and it's difficult for them to be able to be in business. Sid Miller increased fees by $26 million on producers to be able to provide for things like his TV show that he has. And so we're going to go through on the process side. We're going to get rid of fees that we can, and we're going to get rid of regulations that don't work. And then on the profit side, We're going to go in and we're going to revamp the Go Texan program, and we're going to drive the revenue for producers and on the product. That's in relationship to the school lunch program, which the ag commissioner is overfeeding 5.5 million kids in Texas. And last year, we were 44th in the country in the nutritional value of our school lunches. And the current commissioner has been doing that for 10 years. And when he first got in, he brought fat.
You're
He
speaking of
brought
Sid
fryers.
Miller right now, correct?
Sid Miller. He brought fryers back in. He brought sodas back in. And he said that kids are getting fat and we can't keep doing the status quo. And it's gotten even worse on his watch. So we got to revamp that school lunch program so we can give kids healthy food, because what they eat impacts how well they perform.
My kids will not eat the food in the government schools. And,
Yep.
you know, when I was a kid, the food was good. Every kid enjoyed buying a lunch at the school. My children will not do it. They can't do it. And I don't know. I think it's almost like prison food or something like that these days.
Yeah, Sid Miller talks about his Farm Fresh program, where he bought $300 million of local produce. That's 6% less than what's done on the national average. And so he's so proud of, the Farm Fresh program, which was a program that was already established before he got there. He just renamed it. But if it's so successful, then why are we 44th in the country in school nutrition?
Very good point. So let's go ahead and just talk about that. Sid Miller is a household name in the state of Texas. Sid Miller is the sitting agriculture commissioner for the state of Texas. Why are you choosing to take on an incumbent? It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill challenge. Why would you go for that?
Well, I did not start off this process to go against an incumbent. Candidly, I was the CEO of Nature Nates until November of last year, and I was just having a time of reflection in life. I spent 12 years working for a Christian ministry, traveling to 88 countries around the world, telling people about Jesus. And then I left and I started doing the honey company full time and did that for 12 years. And then, I sold that and I was the CEO until November of last year. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what do you have next for me? What's the next area where you want me to invest my life? And so I was with my friend, Rick Santorum, and we were at the National Prayer Breakfast. My wife and I were up in DC in January. Rick and I are at lunch and we're just talking about this, and I'm kind of sharing the same thing with him. And he said, Nathan, you spent all those years, creating a new honey category, and you helped producers be more financially successful, and you cleaned up the honey industry and you created standards that weren't there. You should go do that in the rest of agriculture. What, have you ever thought about being the ag commissioner? I was like, okay. I appreciate that. And so I came back and I was telling Patty about that, my wife, and I've been one of Sid's larger donors over the years. And so I thought, well, I wonder what Sid does. And so I pulled up his job description and looked at it. And candidly, I was surprised, because that's not really what I'd always seen him tweeting about and, and doing social media about. And read through, you're over the school lunch program. You're over the pesticide, herbicide application and use in agriculture. You're over rural economic development, health development, broadband development, your consumer protection, a lot of things that I have been doing through Nature Nates and business ventures over the years. And my wife even said, well, I could really see that. So that was in January. So I started thinking about it, praying about it, talking to people. So in March, I called Sid up and took him to lunch in early March and asked him, hey, what is your plan? Are you going to run again? And he said, well, I'm thinking about running for another seat. And I said, okay, what's that? And he said, well, I'm thinking about running for the Senate. And I said, I think that would be great. I think you should. And I said, I'd like to run for ag commissioner, and kind of laid out this vision of helping farmers and ranchers and cleaning up the food we all eat. And he said, I think you should run. And I said, okay, is that an endorsement? He said, no. And, so he would say, if you were on here with us, he'd say, well, I meant if I didn't run, you would run. So that was in March. And so we declared in April and we launched in May. And then I think sometime in later June, when Kim Paxton announced that he was running for John Cornyn's seat, and Sid said, I'm going to run for ag commissioner. So my initial, motivation behind this, one, I felt like I owed it to Sid to go share with him what I was thinking, not to ask his permission, but give honor to whom honors due. But then secondly, to really go and focus on helping farmers and ranchers. And when I talk to moms out there, especially as it relates to food and our health, everybody kept saying, please go do it, please go do it, please go do it. And so that's why I launched out. It was not to unseat an incumbent. But as I've gotten more into this, and I've really started studying, his tenure, and if he were an employee of mine, I was reviewing his tenure and determining whether I was going to have him work for me next year or not. It'd be time to separate. So, those are the hard decisions that you have to make when you're a leader, is to figure out who are the right people to get in what seats on the bus. And so it's time. We've got to bring ethics back to the Texas Department of Agriculture. We've got to create culture. It's just been destroyed. I've heard that there have been 130 people that have left since March because of his new chief of staff who pled guilty to a felony for commercial bribery, selling hemp licenses that you could get from the state for $100. He would give you, if you gave him $25,000, he'd guarantee that you would get one of the 15 licenses that he said that were only going to be granted. And so he was arrested. He was Sid's campaign manager at the time. He was arrested, pled guilty, but today he's the chief of staff at the Texas Department of Agriculture, being paid $218,000. So it just has created a culture of just skepticism and people just looking out for themselves. It's really dysfunctional right now.
So let's talk about your business. I find the whole story fascinating. You took a small beekeeping business and built it into one of the largest companies of its type in the country. That's almost unheard of these days. An incredible achievement. And then with your ability to sort of set standards on food testing, on food purity, before that was an issue. We've been eating garbage in our foods for many decades now, but we're just learning about it now. But you back, I don't know, in the 1990s, saw this trend and made a case to make foods pure way ahead of the curve. Tell me that story.
Yeah. So I met my lovely wife back in 1996, moved up here to Dallas after I got out of school. We got married, and Patty said, hey, we need a hobby together. And so she was thinking gardening or antiques or, working out together. But back then they actually promoted what the internet was for. It was brand new. And there's one TV commercial with a lady covered up with bees. And it said, you can find anything on the internet. And I'd always loved honey. So I was like, went over and typed in beekeeping Dallas, and up pulled this little honey company, North Dallas Honey. So I called this guy and asked him if I could buy a beehive from him. He said, sure. And so I hung up, and I realized, well, we live in an apartment. And so I called my parents and asked them if I could put this beehive in their backyard. And I just
What year was this?
That was in Plano, Texas. Yep.
What year?
Oh, and 1996. And so, but I just fell in love with it. I mean, just the way that a queen can regulate whether she fertilizes an egg or doesn't fertilize an egg. And when she does, it turns into a male. When she doesn't, it turns into a female. And so in the spring, she starts laying some male eggs in case they have to hatch a new queen, and they need to be there to copulate with the new queen. But the males don't go out and collect nectar or honey. They're just there to have sex with the new queen if she hatches out. So all summer long, the guys are just kind of hanging out. But in the fall, there's not a chance they're going to hatch a new queen. So the girls take all the guys out front and sting them to death, and it turns into a slumber party with all the girls in the wintertime. I mean, just that.
Can't trust him, man. You can't trust him.
But it's amazing. So this guy that I bought the beehive from, Fred, had started this little honey company in 1972. He had 100 beehives. He was in about 10 local health food stores. And he was about 75 years old and had cancer and had a hard time getting around. So I started getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go put honey on the shelf for him. And then Patty and I started going down to his house, and we'd bottle honey by hand. She was a school teacher. She'd get done, and we'd go bottle honey by hand in his garage and put it in a box, and I put it in the box, and I bring it to the store. And so in the summer of 1997, Fred asked me one day, we had just gone and bought a drum of honey. He said, hey, why don't you buy the honey company? And I thought, buy the honey company? Why in the world would I want to do that? And I said, how much you want, Fred? And he said, $10,000. I said, I want $10,000. He goes, well, I'll finance it. And so I bought it the summer of 1997 for $10,000 on terms, but I didn't buy the bee side. I bought the product side. And so I hired a beekeeper up in Paris, Texas to bottle the honey. And then I hired a distributor, a direct store distribution distributor, like I was talking about earlier, to go put honey on the shelf. And so every other weekend, I get a U-Haul trailer. I put it behind my green Jeep Cherokee Wagoneer. I drive up to Paris, Texas, bring back 2 or 3 pallets of honey, unload it in my garage, and I had an army of high school kids from church, from teaching Sunday school, and I'd pay them a penny a label to come over and label honey. Then I'd put it back in the trailer and bring it to my distributor. And I did that Patty and I did that pretty much for about 8 or 9 years. But that same year I went on a mission trip and then wound up going to work for this Christian mission agency full time. And so I always had the honey company on the side. And then in 2010, we started doing it full time. And that's when we really, started really trying to focus on, can we turn this into a business? And at the time, people didn't trust people in the honey world. There had been kind of an expose. Gotcha. A reporter went out and pulled a bunch of honey off the shelf in like a Costco, and they went and tested the pollen, and there was no pollen in it. And they realized that that was Chinese tallow that had been transshipped to other countries and brought in. And so there was all of this, confusion and distrust in the honey world and grocery world with consumers. And so I wanted to become the most trusted honey company in the world. But I also wanted to live out my faith, and I felt like corn syrup was killing kids. And so I wanted to replace corn syrup with honey. And so my mission statement was to honor God and help you and your family live healthy lives. And so that was, our vision and our mission. And so the way that I felt like we could build trust was through transparency. And the only way we could be transparent was if I tested honey. And so I went and initially I started testing all the honey for antibiotics, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, corn syrup, rice syrup. And so I'd test it. A beekeeper would send me a sample. I'd test it, and then I'd contract it, and then I'd test it after I got the load and match those up and make sure it was the same honey. But I also paid that beekeeper more than he would get paid by anybody else. And I didn't ever take any deductions, and I paid on time. So at first, beekeepers were annoyed that I was testing honey because nobody tested honey back then. But all of a sudden, over the next few years, I started seeing all this clean honey start showing up because the increased revenue influenced how the producers produced honey. They would be more mindful of where they put their hives to make sure they didn't get into agriculture where they get pesticides or herbicides or fungicides in the honey. So going back to our earlier conversation about increasing revenue for these producers, the more they sell to a consumer, the more they're going to realize the cleaner, more nutritious and healthy my food is, the more I can sell it for. And so all of that starts to become a free market solution to helping financial drive revenue for producers and drive cleaner food for consumers. But that's what we were doing in the honey business back then. And so within just 3 years, we became the #1 branded honey in America. Also because I created the raw and unfiltered sector of honey. I have my personal cell phone number on the back of every bottle of honey I sold from 1997 till 2014. And I talked to every single person. I mean, thousands and thousands of people. And I knew exactly why people ate honey. And that's why I focus on the attributes, just like when you go buy milk, right? So you think, am I want organic milk or non-organic? And then your next question is, do I want 2% whole? What's the type of milk? And then the brand. And so I knew that people were eating honey because they wanted to help with their allergies, which the FDA wouldn't let us talk about. And so it had to have pollen in there. And so when you looked at the label and it said unfiltered, that meant there was pollen in there. And then raw meant that we didn't heat the honey up very high. We just got it a liquid enough so we could run it through cheesecloth and pull out the wax and the bees, but leave all the pollen in there. And then the Nature Nates brand I put at the very top, very small, and it was, tertiary compared to the attributes. And that's what drove our success. Quality, flavor, and focusing on a label and the attributes.
That's amazing. Did those insights that you had way ahead of the curve for purity, Did it have impact on other food industries?
Yeah, I think consumers over time have become much more aware of what are the inputs that are going into our food. And I was actually talking with some of the ag associations just this week, and we were talking about, do consumers really read labels? And I said, absolutely. Not only do they read labels, but now they've got ChatGPT and Grok, and they've got the world's knowledge at their fingertips. And so a mom with kids, she'll go out and she'll start asking questions in ChatGPT about what chemicals are used in agriculture, or how's this made, or how's this done. And it's shocking the level of knowledge that just general every ordinary day people have now about how food is produced. And now you go layer on the Maha movement on top of that with Bobby Kennedy, and it's only brought it to a fever pitch level of people recognizing. And listen, we all know that everybody's getting sick. I mean, 70% of all Americans have one chronic disease or more. We spend $5 trillion a year treating symptoms of diseases related to the food that we eat. 78% of kids 18 to 25 can't not even serve in the military because of their health. So we've got a chronic disease issue in America, and we finally have come to the conclusion that it's related to the food that we eat. And so everybody wants to clean up and figure out, why are we all suffering?
Yep, totally agree. Totally agree. I
So-
want to pull it. I want to pull a statement from your website. This is what you say. Quote, Texas has the most robust agricultural economy in the nation. What grows in Texas feeds the nation, unquote. What does that mean? How robust is our agriculture in the state of Texas?
Listen, we've got the number one cattle business in America. It's a $15.5 billion cattle industry. We've got a $5 billion poultry and egg business in Texas. We've got a $3.5 billion dairy industry in Texas. We have a $1.6 billion corn industry in Texas. I mean, the total agricultural GDP impact for the state of Texas is $150 billion. I mean, it's significant. And so, it's in jeopardy and it's in decline. And so that's why it's so important. But we've got to get producers, we've got to get young producers back into agriculture, and we've got to create an environment where they can do it and be profitable. Things like solar farm, wind farms, those have disproportionately manipulated the land value in rural Texas, when a farmer that might have land that was worth $500, $600, $700 an acre, but now they're going to come in, they're going to pay $2,500 an acre because they want to come in and put a wind farm in there or a solar farm in there. And so, which is a great windfall for that one producer. But what about all the other people that want to get in there? The Chinese, there's been a lot of foreign owned land that's come in. 166,000 acres have been designated that are owned by Chinese, here in Texas. And luckily, we finally were proactive, both America and Texas, to stop foreign agents from being able to purchase land in Texas. But we've had about, I think it's 3.5 million acres be taken out of agriculture over the past 20 years. I mean, that's a massive amount of land. And so we have a shrinking footprint. We have more people moving into the state. We're having greater water consumption. Water's in decline. Water in West Texas, where my ranch is, I mean, it's tough going out there in West Texas. And that's even before they start layering in all the data plants, data facilities that they're going to be building out there. So, Texas has always had a significant influence in America and the world. And when people think of cattle, you think of Texas. and we got to get back to the strength that we once were.
One of the things you talk about is how we're losing transportation jobs in the agriculture sector in our rural areas. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with, again, input costs. One, transportation costs are impacted by labor and cost of diesel. The cost of diesel is probably 60% more than just unleaded gasoline today. One of the things that the Biden administration has done is they raised the diesel tax to be able to help fund, roads and things like that. But that has made distribution costs, just incredibly expensive. Now, during COVID, we had a lot of issues with port closure, and then ports were stacking up when they were closed. We had a shortage in containers. You used to be able to bring a container in from Europe for $2,500. During COVID, you were spending $15,000 to bring that in. And so we never really had those impacts from COVID really settle back to the level that they were pre-COVID. And so now if you are a producer and you're having to sell your production further away, it just costs you more to go and transport it. And with, we're clamping down on immigration, which is a great thing, and I am 1,000% behind it. But there is an impact, in people who historically might have been in jobs that did things like transportation, and so that just is another part of the impact of where we are today in agriculture.
One of the things that you talk about is how foreign adversaries are a threat to our agricultural sector. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So when you think about China, I think two different times this past 12 months that border agents have arrested Chinese nationals who, one was bringing in a blight, which was a disease, and it was a cultured blight that he was bringing in. Another one was bringing in a worm, again, that would impact agriculture. And so there are foreign agents that want to bring disruption to America, obviously. You think about fentanyl. We've been battling fentanyl coming in, and it's killing Americans left and right. Well, 60% of those chemicals originate out of China. And Donald Trump, even last week, was over talking with Xi Jinping, trying to, minimize the impact that fentanyl could have in America. Those motivations are not just didn't go away just, because they only bring that towards fentanyl. I mean, it's an adversarial country, whether it's Iran or whether it's North Korea or whether it's China. These other countries are not looking out for our best interest. And so we've, Donald Trump has brought in the tariffs, which have, made it challenging in different sectors. But I will tell you that he is trying to level the playing field, which has been disproportionately against American agriculture historically. I could buy honey in Mexico from Mexico. I could never sell my honey in Mexico. I could buy honey from Europe, but I could never sell honey in Europe because countries have, protective trade policies to protect their industries. And so that has been, a negative, disproportionate impact on agriculture. And I'll say the final thing, Chris, is with where labor stands today, with all the costs that go in and operating inside of America, it's easier for companies to go and offshore and go and do production in foreign countries, which, is good from a cost standpoint. But we also don't know what standards they have in terms of production of good agriculture, farming standards. And so we need to try to reshore as much of that agriculture production as we can in America. And as we do that, deconsolidate and create more robust, smaller farms all throughout Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I see this consolidation of industry as being a problem in all sectors. You were talking about going into the retail space and, using your position to create retail space in retail stores for Texas-based products. But the problem with that is that all the retail companies are consolidated as well. So they have considerable power that a well evenly distributed, largely diversified retail sector wouldn't have, And I just feel like this private equity, this consolidation of industry, all of these trends are not good for the country. Just speaking out loud.
If you think about, I think one of the lowest hanging fruit accesses to create, I know retailers wouldn't like this, but we should have farmers markets at every little elementary school in Texas. I mean, mom, go drop your kids off on Wednesday in the morning and then go over to the farmers market right there in the parking lot and go buy your produce for the week. If we could go and create that, I mean, that could just completely change the face of agriculture in Texas. But again, I'm not trying to set up a Texas Department of Agriculture that is relying upon Nathan Sheets, the entrepreneur, to be there to make it be successful. I want to create an environment that is less government and more free market, but using the influence of the position and the bully pulpit to bring the people together that you need to have in the room to make decisions and solve problems. And when you think about Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump, Bobby Kennedy started showing up in boardrooms and saying, hey, let's get rid of red dyes and this dye and this chemical and this processed food. Let's get rid of these things. And all of a sudden, these companies started saying, oh, well, we'll sell you the recipes that we've had and been selling in Europe for the past 30 years. It's like, okay, what do we have? Like sucker written across my forehead? Or Donald Trump showing up at Coca-Cola and saying, hey, why don't you guys do a cane sugar Coke? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we can dust off that recipe. So companies' responsibility is to drive shareholder value. That's it. Yeah, so how they drive shareholder value? Profitability.
One more thought I'm just going to put out there, and I don't know this. This is just me thinking out loud, is I feel like one of the reasons that private equity is so strong, one of the reasons that consolidation happens is because there's so much cash in the market, and it's because of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, they print cash to such an extent, and I feel like it goes in the hands of these politically connected groups that are largely financial firms, and that stimulates and funds this consolidation of industry. That stimulates and funds this private equity craze that we're in. And if we simply got a hold of our currency and returned it away from the Federal Reserve, a whole new reformation on that area, it would largely solve this issue. That's me thinking out loud.
Well, as an entrepreneur, the greatest challenge entrepreneurs really have, and they don't know it, is about working capital. Working capital requirements to grow a company is directly proportionate and impacted by how successful you are. So the more successful you are, the more working capital you need to grow into the future. And so it becomes this massive cash-eating machine to be successful. And so there only comes a time where bootstrapping can only go so far, and finally you succumb to the financial pressure because of the requirement for more money to come and make that company work. So I think approaching it and thinking of it from how do we create capital access that has the same mindset as capital access for private equity. Now, the reason why they have capital access for private equity is because they're experts and they have trust from their investment equity investors that they know how to manage those companies and turn them around and drive shareholder value. And that's why they have access to capital. And sometimes, startup entrepreneurs and even entrepreneurs that have been doing it for a little while, they just don't have the ability to operate with excellence. And so maybe some of these things that we need to really do is help train, agriculture producers more on the business side, to allow them to be more successful.
So one of the things we talked about earlier was something called the New World Screwworm. What in the world is the New World Screwworm?
The New World screwworm is a fly. It looks like a blowfly. It's been down in South America. We've had it in America in the past. We've had outbreaks of New World screwworm in the southeast, and we've even had it in Texas. And what the fly does is it lands on an animal that has an open wound, or an animal like a calf that just came out and it's got the umbilical cord. Then those flies land in that area and lay an egg. And within 7 hours, that egg pupates and it screws the New World screwworm, it screws into that animal or even people. And that pupates into a maggot, which then starts to eat the living flesh. And so it's eating from the inside out. Unlike blowflies that eat dead flesh, and they're outside in. And so when we had an outbreak in Texas in the 70s, we got rid of it by doing a sterile fly program where they would take male flies and irradiate them and sterilize them. And then they would release 500 million flies a week. And the females would mate once, and whether the male was sterile or not, they mate. And so the goal was to outpopulate the fertile flies with the sterilized flies. And so that's how we killed it out. So this has been creeping up from South America over the past couple of years, especially with it started with COVID and then with the mass exodus of people and the cartels, utilizing cattle to move drugs. Then it's gotten within 70 miles of the border. And so the USDA has shut down the border. There's no importation of cattle into America at this point, which has really created chaos in the meat packing industry because they don't have enough throughput to be able to cover their overhead. And so they're losing, hundreds of dollars for every animal that they process. So the results of that, with record high beef prices, is we have the lowest herd population in Texas that we've had for 70 years. And so the prices are so high that people are not holding back heifers to have more calves. They're sending them off to be slaughtered. And so we've got to help farmers and ranchers be able to help grow the herd so we can work our way out of this. And right now, Donald Trump's talking about bringing, meat in from Argentina, which is better countries to do it would be Australia, but bring meat in to help lower the cost of steaks at retail for consumers. But that's not going to help us with the long-term need to grow our herd.
Wow. Fascinating. Well, it certainly was an incredible hour, and I got more information out of this than I ever imagined. A really productive hour, interesting, fascinating. Nate, we're here at the end of the show, and if you could just tell us where people can learn more about your campaign and yourself.
Yeah, you can go to natesheets.com. That's Nate sheets, like bed sheets, natesheets.com. You can go to our website. You can go to Nate Sheets for Texas and follow us. And, again, we just need a leadership at the Texas Department of Agriculture. That's a true conservative. Sid Miller loves to call me a rhino, but I'm not the one that voted to give illegal aliens in-state tuition when I was a state representative, like he did. And I wasn't a lobbyist for a couple of years before I ran for ag commissioner like he was. And so, don't get confused by his whole mantra of Nate Sheets is a millionaire rhino elitist that has no knowledge of agriculture. I think in the past hour, you can see that I've got a pretty good understanding of where we are, but more importantly, the ability to bring the right people to the table so we can help fix these things and help farmers and ranchers be greater and more successful than ever and clean up all the food that we all eat.
Outstanding. Excellent. Very good. Well, Nate, I look forward to your election. When is the election?
So early voting starts, I think, February 17th, and then the primary vote is March 3rd. So vote Nate Sheets for Ag Commissioner. And again, natesheets.com. And listen, one of the things that we really need is we need people that can make contributions. I mean, Sid is a three-time winner of people that have come up against him. He's got 1 million people on Facebook, and so he also has the resources of the Texas Department of Agriculture that he's even using today to help promote his campaign, like the Go Texan program, where he's putting big pictures of his own banners at concerts now. So, if we really want to change Texas, I need everybody to come alongside and put their shoulder to the load, and making a contribution would be a strategic investment.
Great. Looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an election, a contest of epic proportions for the agriculture commissioner for the state of Texas. I never knew it was such an integral position, that it was so important to our state, but we certainly learned that here tonight. So I want to thank you again, Nate Sheets. I look forward to it. And this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. We will be back next Tuesday.